dressed up and everything. I'm kidding.
Sorry, brother. Sorry.
I don't know if it's something on our end. I just want to make sure I get clear. Oh, Dave's working on some knots here.
About that.
Hey, Travis.
Yep. Yes.
Better now. Okay.
All right, we turned the volume up. All right, folks, it's right at 9 o'clock. Welcome to another edition of Friday Morning Live. Today is May 30th, BG Murphy. Can you believe that? But we're excited to bring you all another edition of Friday Morning Live. We'll kick it off by reminding everybody on Sunday is the start of the 2025 hurricane season. So certainly every show this month, we reminded folks that that is fast approaching, and it's the beginning of that. I don't think there's anything circulating out there, but certainly everybody needs to be aware of that and going forward. So, again, May 30th, there is yours truly, Dave Newell. Glad you all are here this morning. And just a couple housekeeping items before we bring in our special guests. Web-based learning, just a reminder, those classes are updated on a weekly basis. So if you need CE or have a topic that you're interested in, please let us know, or otherwise just go on the FAI site under the Education tab and look at all the webinars and webcasts that are upcoming over the next few months. And again, as a member benefit, BG, this is something that we've done for the last few years. Just a reminder, folks, each month, these 4 classes are available to you as a member of the association, an agency member. And so it's the 4-hour law and update class, and then 2 commercial lines classes along with 1 personal lines class. So those are member benefits. So if you need some C, please take a look at those and certainly share that with your team as well. Just 3 weeks from Wednesday, or I guess, 3 weeks from this past Wednesday, we'll be in Orlando for our convention, the Road to Success, June 18th through the 20th. So many of you I know on this call are already registered. So look forward to seeing you. Safe travels. But it's going to be a great show, a great opportunity to meet and greet and be around many of your fellow agents, but certainly a lot of carrier partners and exhibitors that certainly support independent agents. And, this is a post-legislative update. If you want the full update for those that are already registered for convention, reminder, from 1 to 5 on that Wednesday afternoon is the total 4-hour law and update class with Jeff Odom, BG Murphy, and certainly Laura Pierce. And we may have some special guests as well pop in, right, BG? And so if you want to take the full 4-hour class live at convention and you're going to be there, certainly look forward to seeing you there Wednesday afternoon from 1 to 5 that day. So without further ado, let's bring in our special guest today, BG Murphy, Director of Government Affairs here at FAI. Good morning, BG.
Good morning, Dave. Thank you for having me.
And then Travis Moore. Good morning, Travis.
Good morning. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, BG, for having me.
Yeah, and we look forward to it. Many of you on this call have met Travis in your travels. For those that are in the community association arena, but many of it have seen stuff that Travis writes and puts out on behalf of some of his clients. And certainly BG is very familiar with Travis and some of the work that we've done together when it comes to community association. So BG, I'll turn it over to you to kind of give a little background on Travis, and then we'll kick this thing off on the first slide, House Bill 913.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I have to remind people doing what I do for a living is that, I spend the majority of my time with stakeholders that are directly in the insurance industry. But having Travis on today is a good reminder for all of us is that y'all know this. Y'all do it every day, practitioners. We work with a lot of people outside of the common insurance industry, if you will. And so Travis is for those of you who may not know, is a lobbyist like me. And he has worked and I'll let him tell you this, but he's worked in the community association space for many years. And so oftentimes, when the condo association is much like the insurance industry, or condo world is much like the insurance industry, and that they just seems like just about every year they have what we call an omnibus bill, kind of a cleanup regulatory bill. And so oftentimes, there are insurance pieces of that bill, and we'll communicate with Travis. And so just another reminder of the importance of having those relationships, both in and outside of our direct industry. So Travis, before we kick into the bill, you got anything that I missed?
No, that I think that pretty much covers it. And then we can start right in with kind of a little bit of a global high altitude look, and then get into some specifics of what passed this year.
Absolutely. Dave, you want to kick it to the next slide?
Right there, sir.
So when I talked to Travis initially about coming on, our expertise is insurance. we can speak to insurance all day, every day. If I can't, there's people in my office that can, most assuredly. But a lot of our agents, with the changes that have happened recently in law, they are having impacts on insurance because by nature of what they are. So as we have had new laws passed recently with milestone inspections, with the structural integrity reserve studies, different things, as those of you who dabble in the commercial residential marketplace, y'all understand the importance of those mechanisms. Those are coming up in discussions both with your clients and with the insurance companies you work with. And while we're familiar enough about the issues, we really thought it'd be good to have someone in here who deals with this day in and day out, who could speak a little bit more fluently to these issues. So Travis, if you could kind of maybe, and honestly, maybe you need to start from last year, kind of
Sure.
What's going on in the condo world? What were the big takeaways from this bill this year? Just kind of your perspective on where things go.
Sure. And thanks again, for the opportunity to chat with you and your members. Because there is a nexus between obviously the community association world, whether it's HOAs, co-ops are certainly now the focus on condos and those larger commercial residential properties. As you said, every year there's a number of bills get filed that deal with community associations, typically from constituent concerns that legislators have. And then they kind of, meld into one big package, and they decide, okay, this is kind of what's going to go. Rather than deal with, 10, 15 bills, they say, let's do one. And then ever since the Surfside collapse, which next month will be 4 years, they have focused on the structural elements, and they've said, all right, look, there were 2 counties in the state of Florida of our 67 that had a recertification program where somebody was actually looking at a building, a threshold building that after it had been built, and that was Miami-Dade and Broward. They had the 40-year recertification program, but nowhere else, unless you were pulling permits to redo a building, or there had been a complaint where something had happened in a parking and the building department had come in. Nobody was looking at that. And large commercial structures like hotels, apartments, office buildings, where there is one centralized ownership. If this had been a Marriott, the hotel owner would have done the maintenance through the years, and would have said, you're now going to pay, $300 a night to stay on the beach instead of $200, and the tourists wouldn't have cared, and everybody would have been fine. But when you're dealing with a condo, very unique to that setting, you have, 100, let's say, owners, who all own a piece of that, and therefore all get a say in how it's maintained. And as your members know, as they're dealing with it with insurance, these are volunteer boards. They're looking. And this is not to be disparaging, but they're looking for the cheapest way to go, and just human nature. And so they're like, we don't need to do that roof yet. We don't need to do this. It's an investment property, whatever the case may be. And they would push that maintenance on. Florida had was one of the few states that did have mandatory reserves, but we only had them in 4 different building categories, and we were the easiest of those 11 states that allowed for the waiving of those reserves. So you could waive reserves, but just a majority of a quorum at a meeting. So, you know, a very small percentage of that ownership could just waive. And so that's what they did. They would say our monthly fees are going to be this. If we do the reserves, they're going to be this. If we don't, and we just, you know, special assess when we need the money. So through the collapse, unfortunately, the Senate approach had been, you know, we need to figure out, you know, what's going on with these buildings. We need to do essentially what's happening in Miami-Dade and Broward in these inspection programs. And so they called it a milestone inspection program. We need to do that statewide and move that across, you know. So they said, all right, if you're 30 years of age, when your building hits 30 years of age, you're going to do a milestone inspection. If your building is 3 stories or higher, and then every 10 years thereafter. The House said, well, you know, the collapse happened in one of the counties that had these inspections. It's not the inspections, it's the fact that they're not maintaining these buildings. So they focused on the reserve side. And so they came up with what's known as the Structural Integrity Reserve Study, or what you hear from your members, probably a lot of your association clients a lot, is the SIRS. And so they kind of melded it together in a weird kind of way to kind of try to compromise. And they came out with this, you know, first bill 4 years ago, this 4D, and it just didn't work. So then the next year they did 154, which was this condo 2.0 to kind of try to make it work. Then last year they came up with a bill. They were like, yeah, you know, as they were going around, you know, holding town hall meetings, trying to figure out how it best works out in the field. And as the deadlines were approaching, and then hearing a bunch of stuff on just general association issues, they came up with another bill, this 1021, which was kind of this 3.0, which brings us to this year. So this session, the one that just ended, well, technically hasn't really officially ended because they're still dealing with the budget, but they never end. But the substantive stuff on May 2nd, they passed House Bill 913, which Dave mentioned, PG mentioned, and we could talk about, and that provides really, and that now was really being pushed by the governor, was saying, look, you guys, and it even was going to call them into a special session and do a bunch of things, saying you guys have to make this work. You know, there's a whole bunch of panic out there as this thing hits in 2026. So the 913, the House had their bill, the Senate had their bill. 913 is the House bill number that actually passed, although it looks a lot more like the Senate bill 1742 that actually ended up passing. That bill is not yet gone to the governor. It's still part of like 100 and some bills of the 200 and some that have passed that has not gone to the governor. It will go very soon. I mean, you could go in a batch today even, and when it goes, the governor's already indicated publicly and also to the sponsors and to the leadership that he's going to sign it. So then that will go into effect July 1. One other bill that deals with condo issues that did pass that also will go to the governor, has not gone, is 393. And I just mentioned that because it deals with the MySafe Florida condo program to finally make it work for associations. The way it was originally structured, there was no way it was going to work for condos. So now that will work. They're going to use the money from last year's 30 million. They still have about 26.4 million of that they still have available. So it will go, and they do not have to wait for that to take effect July 1, because they don't have to wait for that to take effect in the budget. It will become effective immediately upon becoming law. So when the governor signs that, it'll go.
Let me ask you a quick question there.
Sure.
I know that the budget process is, and for those of y'all listening, I'll bring y'all up to speed after we wrap up with the condo discussion. But the most recent budget offers, whatever standard you want to use for that, is I don't know that we have any legitimate budget offers at the moment. But the last of the kind of budget reports that we saw, there are additional funds appropriated for this year, correct? On top of what's coming from last year?
No, the only amount that they have is let's call it 30 million
30
that
million
they carried over. So yeah, so it will go quickly. Last year when the program, everybody's familiar with the MySafe Florida Home program for single family homes. The condo program was brand new, so they had to hire a consultant team to figure out how to make it work. They had to hire all the inspectors because they're different than a single family home. And so they didn't even start submitting or taking applications and doing inspections until November. And it literally only lasted like 6 days. And then they were like, we got to stop because we're going to run out of money. And by the way, it's not going to work. And I'll give you the prime example of, or hurdle was that it took 100% of an association. So 100% of the owners had to agree. And I got to tell you, we can't get 100% of an owners to agree that today is Friday. So it wasn't going to work. So so that money will now, it only takes 75%. It also, they got rid of all this crazy math dealing with square footage and this portion for the roof and this portion for windows and doors and blah, blah, blah. So now it's essentially, you can get up to $175,000 per association. But that will go obviously quick. I mean, we could do the math quickly that let's call it 30 million to do the inspections. And then if you had X amount of associations at 175,000, even if they got the max, it's not going to go far. So, but because of the budget issues, they didn't want to add new money. So I think we'll be able to show that this is a program that is popular. I think it's a program that will show from your membership and work. We'll be able to show, hey, we can get WINMIT credits, different things. This is something that will help associations. So I'm hoping that in next year's budget, we'll be able to, now that it's kind of going to run, be able to say, hey, we need significantly, more money because it's a good investment.
Absolutely. I think that just about covered. Go ahead.
Well, and I'm saying we can talk real quick about this 913. If
yeah, we're showing. You don't see it. We're showing it on our screen.
Oh, okay. All right. So let me. Oh, okay. Here I see now. You got the key provisions. Let me just real quick, even off of this, just the main thing that you'll hear that's the benefit is this pause. So when an association they're 30 years old, they had not been maintaining their building the way, they now had to do this inspection, and then they were being told, well, you've got some things that need to be done, and that inspection goes to the local building department. So now the building department knows you're now put on a clock, you've got to do these repairs. They know that if you're pulling permits or not, so they can kind of keep track of whether or not you're doing the repairs. It goes to all the owners, this report, within 45 days of the board getting it. It has to go to all the owners, goes to potential buyers. So there is no more hiding, what's going on with these buildings. So the issue was, let's say you needed $15 million worth of repairs, and you then go to your reserve cupboard. You don't have reserves, so you either had to take out a loan or you had to special assess your owners, which was going to be very expensive. And then at the same time, you had to then start putting away these reserves starting in your 2026 budget for these 8 items, roof, different, concrete restoration, different things. So if you needed to do the repairs and, this structural integrity report that you were supposed to have done by December 31 of 2024, and it was saying, the remaining useful life on these components is only a year, 2 years. Maybe Citizens is breathing down your neck saying you've got to replace your roof in a year. Then you're now having to do 2 things. So you're having to do your payment, now to do the repairs, and then you're having to do a big increase in your reserves. So it was really hitting them hard. It was like I pay my taxes quarterly, so it was like, you know, on a April 15th, I not only have to pay the whatever I still owe from last year, I'm now having to pay my first quarter payment for next year. So it's a big rough day. So that was what was happening with associations. So what this says is, if you do that milestone inspection, you have repairs and you've done, focus on those. You now can put a pause on having to do the reserve stuff for up to 2 years. So you can do the reserve, because not only spend the money on doing the reserves, but then also you're then going to do a SIRS. And when you look at these these components, they're now going to be new. So your remaining useful life of now those items is not 2 years, which really is a quick ramp up. It's now maybe 15, maybe 20 years, maybe, you know, 10, whatever. So it's really pushing those out because these components are now have been repaired. So that's going to be a big deal. Also, it was an all kind of, the reserve thing was an all cash deal. This allows for associations to do alternative funding where they can go to DBPR and get their plan approved, to say, hey, we want to do it this particular way. They can use lines of credit, they can use loans, they can structure it differently going forward, which is it gives them flexibility. The other thing is, because this SIRS was brand new, you could have it, you know, an engineering company could do it, a reserve study company could do it, and you could have 3 different organizations. Oh, well, and I will also say that before this became a requirement in the law, we had about 6 companies statewide that did reserve studies. After this, we now have over 60, because now they're all getting into it, all kinds of people. So there was another issue where there was no uniformity. So somebody could do one and say, your SIRS, you're now having to do, you know, let's say you got to increase your monthly assessments, have to be increased by $200 a month per unit. Somebody else could do it and say $68, and it's just all over the board. So now this is going to say, DBPR, you have to come up with a uniform form and method and manner to, you know, and put these terms into, like, what does it mean to say fully funded? Well, you know, you can use baseline funding, which baseline funding just means you can't go below zero. So you can build up these pools and then drain them when you need them, build them back up. So you only have to have the money when you need the money. So there's a lot more just clarity will be offered. And so those types of things are going to be a big help. So also, and I also just want to mention that if any of your members ever have, have questions, you can provide my email address. I have no problem with that. Provide it to whoever you want out there, Dave or PG, and they can always just email me, and I can certainly try to help talk to them and get them. Like you said at the outset, PG, I may not know the answer, but I know, reserve study people, banks, all kinds of people within the industry that can help.
Absolutely.
Be careful what you wish for, Travis. I just letting you know.
Okay.
But
All right.
Seriously, and we will do that because you've been a friend. You've been somebody that we have counted on over the time, and certainly a trusted resource, certainly for this association and some on this call that you know personally. So.
And I'm happy to do it. Also, there were some other things that were, because as we talked about, when they do these omnibus things, they also, these members had also been listening to people, had been going to association meetings, had been looking at these SIRS. So they did things like, okay, you have to include the required things, these 8 items, but an association, maybe some board was like, well, here's our chance to redo the lobby and the cabana and things that might be good and increase the value, but they're not requirements, but they were putting it all mixed in. So they made sure that those things are separated. But then they also did things like make it easier to deal with electronic voting, make it easier to deal with video conferencing. So, just kind of bring us up into the times with people should be able to do board meetings on Zoom and other things. So they also did things in there that were beyond just the building safety issues in that bill.
Right. And then, BG, as we close the loop on this on 913, there was something that we certainly have gotten some questions internally and externally here at FAI. So let's just talk about making sure we're clarifying one of the provisions that's at the bottom of the page here on the screen in reference to condominium associations providing adequate property insurance.
So we just very briefly, those of you who write community association insurance know that there is law in place right now in Chapter 718, 111, 11A, and establishes insurance requirements, defines adequate property insurance coverage, and then kind of provides a few different options that an association can pursue to satisfy that requirement. There were some slight changes. We saw them early on in session, saw them in the bill, reached out to sponsors, reached out to staff, reached out to Travis. Travis, would you mind speaking just kind of from y'all's perspective on that language, kind of what the intent was there?
Yeah, so one of the things that, these members, Lopez, let's say Representative Lopez that does this, that did this bill in the House and had been working on this for a number of years, she's got like 600 and some condo associations in her very dense condo district in Miami. As they go to all these town hall meetings and different things, and even though obviously insurance rates, certainly over the last year in the commercial space, have stabilized, coming down, and the outlook is certainly better. They were hearing things like, we want as much these options that the law provides for us. We want to be able to kind of explore them because they're in the law. So we had always looked at it as kind of like these three options, where there was the option where you could get together in like a loss limit program, get three or more, you had to go to OIR, you had to get approved, blah, blah, something that has actually never actually happened. OIR's never done it. It doesn't exist yet, but it's in the law and it's there. And then there was this next option, which is where everybody kind of lives, which is you got to get your appraisal. You do an update every 36 months, every 3 years. And then also as part of that, there was this, or you can get a wind model of a 1 in 250-year storm approved through the wind modeling, commission, the Hurricane Commission, an approved model. Then you also had to go to to OIR. It also had to be a 3 or more group thing. But the way the law was, it was all like together. So some of these people were saying to these members, look, we don't know if it works for us, but the way the law is structured, it's like we can't even do it we have to do the appraisal thing anyway. So it doesn't make like any sense. So the legislators were like, all right, all we want to do is we want to separate this now out into 3. So they left 1 alone. They took number 2 and they changed it and put this 1 in 250-year storm thing into a 3. They created a 3, A and B. So they said you can do 3. You have to get this model, 1 in 250-year storm, insure up to that, approved model. And then B has to be approved by OIR, and it's also just for groups of 3 or more. And so now, though, it now says, 1, 2, 3. But then there's some concern that, and when I was looking at it and looking and talking to folks saying, well, is this something we can take over from the House bill as we were negotiating on this? Staff was telling me it's more like technical. We're doing exactly what I just said. We're just making it so there's 3 options now, or 3 standalone options. I was being told, well, there's this, may to shall thing that's being changed a little bit on this in 2. And they're like, well, because we're cleaning up 2, I'm taking stuff out of it, making it a 3. We're just cleaning that up. And because of English, because you have this, or what we're trying to say is you may use this appraisal or you use that appraisal. And I'm like, all right, well, in the thick of the battle and everything, it seemed you take people at their word and you're like, all right, well, and again, like, I know condo, I have no idea about insurance. I run to BG and Laura and others. So I was like, all right, sounds fine to me. And again, this is like literally the last day last couple of days of session. So then now, as happens, then you start looking at it again and people start analyzing it. So what we're trying to get now is some clarity from OIR as to the meaning behind. Again, I talked to the legislators. They have said this is what our intent certainly was. It wasn't to have anybody get less insurance, because that becomes a board problem. Then it becomes a condo problem that I have to deal with, because they have a fiduciary duty, and I don't want board members getting sued for not having enough insurance and not being able to fix your building if you have a storm. And then also, I'm like, well, let's try to get the clarity from OIR and others. But then also, if we need to make it clear, if it's not clear, then let's make sure that we're working to clarify it. So I don't know. That may be. I don't know if I answered the question.
Perfect.
Or not.
Yep.
Yeah, that it's good to hear kind of the consistency in messaging on this. This is something that, when you've got a lot of people talking about insurance issues, and Travis, there's a bunch of people that think they understand what they're talking about with insurance in Tallahassee. There's few that actually do. And so it's good just to have that consistency in messaging.
Well, and trust me, there's a whole lot of board presidents that think because they're retired something or other that they also know about everything, and they don't.
Yeah. Well, Travis, I know you're traveling today. Travis is headed out of the country. I won't tell y'all his location and where he's going. He's probably trying to from people like me and everyone else he's had to work with for the past few months. But Travis, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate the partnership. Always enjoy working with you.
Sure.
Tells me we'll have some more issues.
Absolutely.
To work on together.
Oh yeah, we will. And again, if you would share, feel free to share my email with whoever, and we'll get the right answers to people. Again, on the condo stuff, you've got the insurance stuff, squared away, but just on the condo stuff, because you're dealing with these board meetings as an agent. They're all about the budget. What do we have to do, and how do we have to do things? So glad to help if I can.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, brother. Safe travels.
All right. Thank you, guys.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
All right. So, folks, we're going to transition and kind of go back to how we wanted to start off this session of the post-session update, and just talk about the session that could have been, right, BG? I mean, we had some high hopes. We had some things in the hopper. We had some conversations at Capitol Days. We certainly had some conversations back to last August at Summer Leadership about some things that we were thinking about. So let's just kind of highlight a couple of these and then go into the stuff that actually passed for those on the call today.
Yeah. And so for those of you who were at Capitol Days this year, y'all know it was a little bit different in that we were doing Capitol Days in the first week of session. I believe I was giving my legislative update. It was the morning after the breakfast when the legislature was actually convening for day one of the legislative session. And as I was up there, giving my update, my phone just starts blowing up with text messages. And of course, being a good employee, I'm not reading them, but glancing over at my watch, and I'm getting updates from the speaker and the president's opening speeches. But coming into this session, we knew this was not going to be a fun year. We had two special sessions, as Travis alluded to. The governor actually called a special session where, as he constitutionally can, where he wanted the legislature to address the primary issue was immigration, but he was calling for condo reforms, for hurricane or post-hurricane resources, and a litany of other issues. And that's important to note because that was the moment that this session was defined. Immediately after him calling the legislature back in for special session, he sent out his notice, give them all a heads up, hey, you got to come to Tallahassee. The Senate president and the House Speaker came out jointly and released a memo saying that they would not be doing the governor's special session, that they thought it was premature, and they made it abundantly clear that they did not intend to do what the governor wanted them to do. However, they were required per the Constitution to come to town. So they literally came in, they convened for the special session the governor called and immediately adjourned thus killing every bill, every proposal, every concept that the governor had talked about. They then re-adjourned to deal with one issue and one issue alone, which was immigration. And they ultimately, the House and Senate and the governor were able to work together. So we had all of that kind of percolating, and us in the insurance industry, us in, well, others in other industries, were like, okay, we can see where this year's headed. As all of this is going out, and everyone on this call probably read this article or at least heard about it, a reporter who is known for dropping bombastic articles before every session dropped a article highlighting a report that the OIR had commissioned with some pretty strong accusations about what some affiliates were doing. And I think the title of the article was "Insurers Steering Billions of Dollars to Their Affiliates While Claiming to Be Poor." And that took off. I mean, it overnight became a national discussion. As we looked at other states like Georgia, who was working on tort reform, this was the number one thing the trial bar up there was pointing to, and it set the stage for a session. But that day, during Capitol Days, the speaker came out, and part of his opening speech, he said, we are going to be subpoenaing company execs, CEOs, all down the C-suites to come in and testify in front of committee to answer questions on this. And, that was a pretty startling moment. If you read the report, at least the portion of the report that the OIR did have the ability to release, you found pretty quickly that the narrative was not consistent with what was being portrayed in the article. So just kind of given a little flavor, we knew the speaker had made it abundantly clear. I think the exact quote he used was, "We are not coming to Tallahassee to pass insurance laws written by insurance lobbyists." Then you had the Senate president whose messaging on it was stern, but nowhere near what we were hearing from the speaker. And the speaker made it abundantly clear. And you look at these listed bills: motor vehicle insurance. This is the ever annual PIP repeal bill, probably the biggest bill. And all of these, with the exception of the first bill, passed out of the House. But attorney fees and insurance matters. This was a bill that was sponsored by Representative Hillary Cassell, Vice Chair of Insurance and Banking, and it would have rolled back on the one-way attorney fees. Also, started picking apart at the bad faith reforms we saw recently. Evidence of damages to prove medical expenses. This was the transparency and damages law that passed a couple of years that has really borne some significant impacts on the commercial liability space, commercial auto liability space, excuse me. Residual market insurers. This was actually at one moment in time was FAIA's priority bill, had diligent effort in it, had some cleanup to the citizens' appointment requirements and some other surplus line stuff in it. That bill ended up getting hijacked, and they put a lot of the attorney fee stuff on there. Put in some language to essentially roll back the Citizens Alternative Dispute Program that they have with DOA. And then we're talking about omnibus bills. Senate Bill 230 was the insurance omnibus bill. Speaker ended up taking over that one as well, and put a lot of that stuff in there.
Hey, BG, before we get to the stuff that did pass, Patrick, our friend there down in Southeast Florida, wants to know, where is the completed study from the OIR? Is that information now available? I know there was excerpts from it that came out during the session, but where's that completed study to show that billions of dollars or other things were happening in the industry, sort of behind the scenes?
So the OIR, that is a good question. Was that from Patrick Gleason?
Patrick Lacey.
All right. So through the committee schedule, every week, those of us who follow these calendars were looking, they're like, all right, who's getting subpoenaed this week? And you saw the lobbyists for the various insurance companies kind of hovering around committee suites hats, and you could tell that they were just trying to get some intel. Is my company going to be on this list? What are they going to do? At the end of the day, the House did 2 committee hearings, and they did not have to issue a subpoena in either of them. In one committee, they had former insurance commissioner David Altmaier and current commissioner Mike Jaworski. And then in a separate committee hearing, they had the company that actually did the report. So the current commissioner Jaworski, a lot of his testimony, was answering questions as to why the OIR did not release this report. And his testimony throughout was rather consistent. This was something I inherited. It was a draft report. There are a lot of incomplete portions of this. And so the report was never published. Members of the committee were able to see it. They all had to sign non-disclosures. But there's nowhere that someone like us could go and actually look at this report. So all you can see is kind of like a redacted executive summary of what the report says. But there's just a lot of components missing. The report didn't highlight that there were companies that were suspending fees that the insurance company pays to the MGAs during certain times just to make sure things were stable within the company. So a lot of stuff in that narrative that just was not picked up in the article. It was used as a scare tactic. That this specific reporter, who receives a lot of support from a group that would love nothing more than to dismantle the insurance industry, he did what he does every year. There will be an article next year. There will be another story to tell next year, and we'll have to be responsive. But this one just seemed to stick this year.
Yeah, Patrick, it really doesn't exist. There's a lot of holes in it, and who knows what the next year or two. But there, as the article said, and certainly up here during session, there was a lot of angst about what the next shoe was going to drop from legislators getting subpoenas, getting information beyond that. So more to come on that. So let's turn our attention to what did pass, B.G. Murphy, and House Bill 1549. Eligibility for export. This is something that's been near and dear to your heart for a few years.
I should have put this one at the tail end. Could we just very briefly go back to 913, the Community and Cooperative Association?
We can.
I want to make sure we walk away from that with a clear understanding of what it did. So current law says that a community association is required to have adequate insurance coverage, the full insurable value. Replacement cost is determined by an appraisal every 36 months. And current law provides kind of for 3 options to do that. A self-insurance fund, which is required to be reviewed and approved by the OIR. There's actually chapters in the insurance code that give express direction to the commissioner and the criteria for how he approves those. There is the standard policy based off replacement cost. Is determined by an appraisal every 36 months. And there's, as Travis had mentioned, there's the shared limit policy. All of this language existed under one paragraph, 718, 111, 11A. And this was all kind of, the 3 options were defined under that definition of adequate property insurance. As y'all heard Travis say, and I'm glad that y'all got to hear it directly from someone who was involved, because there has been a lot of misreporting on this proposal. There have been stories saying that people are going to be able to go out and procure an insurance policy and deviate from full replacement cost. You're going to be able to go out and do this and this and this. And because of the way that it's being reported on, because there are people being quoted who don't do what you all do for a living, there is a tremendous amount of misinformation out there on that. Very plainly put, you have one of 3 options, and those 3 options exist in statute today. The only nuance to that is on the shared limit policy. There's some questions about whether or not you would have to, provide coverage for up to, full replacement cost. But the truth is that still has to go to the commissioner for approval. And while I will not speak for the commissioner, what I will say with a high level of confidence given recent discussions around ACV and other things, if he hasn't approved one of these to date, there's no way in hell he's going to approve one moving forward, because there's a tremendous amount of exposure on his office, where, you know, they could be held liable for approving a program that allows a group of associations to take a policy with coverage that's very insufficient. So we're going to be working through this issue over the next few months. We're working with DBPR. We're working with the OIR and the governor's office. We're also working with both of the sponsors just to get out as much information. And then this is going to be a big topic we talk about at Summer Leadership.
Yep.
Is now the time to move that language out of 718 and into the insurance code. No offense to DBPR, but they are not and should not be in the business of looking at an insurance policy and saying, yeah, I believe this works. You need an insurance expert making that determination.
Yep. So more to come on that, folks. And certainly, like BG said, I'm sure if you're coming to convention, this will be addressed during the 4-hour law and update class on Wednesday afternoon. And again, it's at Summer Leadership in August, and we'll throw those dates up there at the end of this. But BG, let's talk about eligibility for exporting. This, again, is something that we've talked about around here. It's been on agents' minds. And so we finally got it over the finish line this year.
I mean, you always like to give Kyle Ulrich grief, as he likes to give it back to me, and he may be listening, and I'm sure he'll give me some grief when we get off this call. But, you know, Kyle and Laura started this discussion many, many years ago. And over the years, we as an association, you all have advocated for reforms to kind of pick back at that diligent effort requirement. And over the years, you know, most every line of commercial insurance has been exempted from this requirement. However, the diligent effort has remained. You know, going back to my days at DFS, I think I was at the department for all of about 4 days before I had my first meeting where I heard about diligent effort. Got to listen to Greg Thomas talk about it, talk about how unworkable those statutes were, listen to him talk about how pointless this form was. And so this year, we set out with kind of 2 goals. Make sure that the insurance reforms do not get unwound this year, and get rid of diligent effort once and for all. We were not supposed to be on this bill. It was, we had a bill moving, as you remember a few minutes ago, I mentioned that the speaker had hijacked it, but one of the things that a lot of people don't know is the speaker was instrumental in making sure the agents got this win. I spoke to the speaker. He reached out to me just about every single week throughout session, and he's like, BG, I got to mess with your bill, but you need to understand, at the end of the day, I'm not putting agents in the middle of this fight, and I'm making sure you get your issue. And so you'll hear a lot of testimony about people and their character and everything, but the speaker told us from the very get-go, you are getting diligent effort this year, and I will not make you be in the middle of the fight between the attorneys and the insurance companies. You have my word, and he stuck to it. So diligent effort's done if the governor signs the bill. But basically what it does is it removes the requirement that you go through that diligent effort process. It still keeps the signed disclosure.
Yep.
And adds some language just to make sure that the consumer knows that the forms and rates of surplus lines insurers are not approved by any Florida regulator. That's a discussion that agents are probably already having, but it just adds that language to the signed disclosure. And the statute still retains the other eligibility criteria. Coverage can't be submitted to the surplus lines marketplace for more favorable terms and conditions. That language has never really been regulated. It's kind of difficult. An agent can't necessarily speak to what the majority of insurance companies have filed. I don't know that the DFS or the OIR could also do that.
Right.
So there are still, despite what you may read, there are still eligibility criteria. But at the end of the day, the takeaway is, should the governor sign this bill, you're no longer going to have to fill out that worksheet.
Yep. Well, with time, we're going to skip over a couple of these, but BG, I just want to go ahead and address. We're going to go right to, we talked about disclosures, but flood continues. We talked about hurricane season. Here it comes. Last year, we certainly had a lot of flood activity in and around the state of Florida. So there are some changes that are coming in relation to flood disclosures.
Yeah, and so this conversation kind of started last year. There was a bill last year that kind of dealt with flood disclosures, and much like the testimony that Travis was giving earlier, they further fine-tuned this bill. In fact, it was the same sponsors last year, who was the same sponsor as the Community Association bill, Senator Bradley. But basically what this does is it expressly requires landlords and sellers of homes, owners of homes who are selling them, to provide specific disclosures to prospective tenants or to prospective buyers about any flood risks, any flood damage or flood experience. It allows for a rental, if that disclosure is not provided, it allows for the tenant to get out of their lease. Requires developers to provide the same information. And then there is language, and it may be on the next slide.
Yeah.
It requires them to notify a prospective tenant, a prospective homeowner or home purchaser, that their property insurance coverage does not include flood coverage. So, as we've looked back over the past couple of years, there has been an immense focus on flood. We had the storm that came up through Central Florida that kind of triggered all of the flood changes for citizens. Excuse me. And so this was just a continuation, making sure people are aware of the risks of flood, of any previous flood experience, and making sure people are informed so they can make the right decisions.
Yeah. So again, on our website, we have the summaries on all these bills. They go into a little bit more detail, but as Travis said earlier, but we'll say it again. You have any questions on any of these bills or questions about some of the provisions, certainly reach out to BG and Laura and the team here at FAI. We'd be glad to walk you through them. So, and then next up, pet insurance, right, BG Murphy? We laugh about it, but this is something that certainly has been talked about the last couple of years, actually. But now we have a bill that kind of establishes some framework around what pet insurance is and should be here in the state of Florida.
So we were having a team meeting a few weeks ago, and we're still in session at this point, so it's been more than a few weeks. But Jeff Odom asked a question, Laura, BG, how long do we need to plan for y'all to talk? At that moment in time, this was the only insurance bill that was going to pass. And I said, buddy, I don't know that I can make the pet insurance discussion last 2 hours. I'm sure we could find a way, as I don't ever struggle with finding additional words. But much like Dave said, this was an attempt to treat pet insurance like a more traditional regulated insurance product, and giving some more of that regulatory backing to that product, establishing standards for companies that offer this, giving some authority to the OIR for how they approve these things, what should be required in these policies. And so really treating pet insurance like a more traditional insurance product. So this is something, and Dave was asking me about this as we were getting ready to start this morning, as this bill becomes effective, and in the months leading up to it, we'll be having conversations with the OIR. Obviously, I'll be having them with our education department, because there are some training requirements for agents that would like to sell these products. And so as the office begins working on their implementation of this new law, there'll be a lot more information to give on this one.
Yep. And then, again, as we enter into hurricane season, there's always this topic, right, BG? We're already getting the flyers. We're already getting pictures from our members that the door hanger people are back in the neighborhoods. The people are going door to door. My son just bought a home, and he got a brand new home, got knocked on and said, hey, I'd like to do a roof inspection. And my son said, I just bought the home. It's a brand new house. Okay. I don't think I need a roof inspection at this point. But he said, well, some of your neighbors took advantage of that. So here we go again, right? But there's some provisions here that may help this session or this season.
Yeah. So this was the initial law, the law in spate that's in statute today was kind of one of the priorities of former CFO Jimmy Petronas last year in his last session as he left this year to take his talents to DC and join the swamp in DC. But last year, one of his agency packages included a provision that said that if someone enters into a contract following a declared state of emergency, what it did is it gave consumers a little protection. As Dave mentioned, these people go out and solicit and knock on doors to try and get people to sign into these contracts. And so there was some language that was put out there that anyone who enters into a contract for repairs, replacement that is a result of damages that were sustained because of that state of emergency in the storm it highlighted, that they had the ability to back out of that contract, required those contracts to have that disclosure notifying the consumer of that right. Much like a lot of the other issues that we've talked about today, this kind of puts some additional criteria into that. It says that the rescission period in that contract only exists for the first 180 days after that event. So after the declaration of the state of the emergency, just to make sure that that doesn't remain in perpetuity, that, if you're signing up for roofing repairs for a hurricane that happened 5 years ago,
Yeah,
you got a pretty good idea what's going on there. And so that was the big nexus for this one. This was just a small piece of a larger roofing regulatory bill.
yeah, but folks, if you run into this type of activity, certainly send it our way. BG and the team, we have some resources to send those things over there to the different divisions to take a look at. But you've been very good up to now, but I'm sure it's going to happen again right after June 1st. So, and then this bill, which I think got some relief for the trial bar, right? BG.
It did.
And then as of the 29th of this month, yesterday?
Yeah.
The governor decided to veto the bill, BG.
So we're in unique times. I mean, the trial bar has been hammered both legislatively, politically, and every other way for the past 3 to 4 years. And this was what was going to be the legislature's first give back. And for those of you who may write medical malpractice insurance, this was what people were calling the free kill bill. It was dealing with an exemption on that prohibited or excluded adult children from any type of med mal benefit from a death and a medical action. And this bill was on its way to going to the governor, and there was a world where it was going to get approved. One of the big things that the governor did say is the only way that I will consider this bill is if you put a cap in. And the legislature went back and forth. The Senate actually added a cap in the final days of sessions at $1 million, sent it back to the House. The House stripped it. And ultimately, the majority of the Senate agreed that there should not be a cap on it. The governor had been very vocal. If we're going to do this, then it needs to have a cap. We cannot have a new crisis in med mal given that we've done so much work on all these other tort reforms in other areas. So we knew it was coming. This is definitely going to play into the ongoing session where the Senate and the House, who were once on the same page against the governor, now you have the House and Senate who are battling. And when I say battle, I mean axes out. Reminds me of a scene from Braveheart. There's not a lot of love lost between the House and the Senate right now. And because of this, and this being a priority for many people in the legislature and the governor's veto of it, this is definitely just one more thing that's going to have an impact on that continued session, as hopefully they work towards a resolution on the budget.
Well, thanks for those words on that. And certainly as we wind down today's Friday Morning Live, just want to remind you, we're going to answer Steve Hall's question here in a sec. But summer leadership, I know we're talking about convention, but just for planning purposes, August 6th through the 8th, Clearwater Beach, our summer leadership conference. And certainly the Legislative Council is always one of those meetings that many of the folks attend that to hear and propose certain things that we bring before the board, and the board approves what that legislative agenda looks like for 26, right, BG?
That's right.
Steve Hall wants to know, what are the likelihood, I know you're not a betting man, BG Murphy, but is there any reason why the governor would not sign the diligent effort bill?
I will tell it for those of you who have ever heard me talk, I always give percentages of 50-50. I will say we have put in as much work since the bill has passed as we did getting the bill passed. Answering a lot of questions, being responsive to those who are saying this is removing a consumer protection. Kyle and myself have been and met with the governor's office. We have champions like Jim Boyd, FAI member, future Senate president. He has been working the governor's office. At this moment, I'm feeling like I want to put it at a 51%.
Okay, wow.
Signed.
Tip the scale.
Which in my world is massive. But only time will tell. I suspect if I were in Vegas going deep, I'd probably put it on the governor signing this bill, but only time will tell.
Okay. All right. Well, again, folks, thanks for joining us for Friday Morning Live. You missed this session, not missed this session, but like to hear some of the parts of it or want to pass it along to your team. All these sessions are recorded. They're on the Friday Morning Live page under the Education tab on our website. So we wish everybody a safe weekend. Thanks for joining us here on Friday Morning Live, and hopefully see most of you at convention in a few weeks. Take care.